Welcome to the Growth Vantage Podcast. My name is Garrett Vita, and I'm your host. I hope you had a good holiday season. I know I sure did, and I'm super excited about this new year coming up, and I'm super excited to share with you today's topic. It's about three good outcomes from having hard conversations. 2022 is gone, but the new year is here, and just like any life, there's good conversations and hard conversations. Good conversations are the ones that flow easily, no conflict. But sometimes in life, there's conversations that make us scared, that we fear that something's gonna bad happen when we have this conversation, or we're scared to have this conversation because we have these different perceptions about what they're gonna say, what they're gonna do, or how they react based off our own perceptions of how they are. And so I wanted to really talk about this topic today because it's inevitable that we will have to have these hard conversations, but they don't have to be hard and doesn't be as bad as you think they are. And so really want to share with you what the possibility of having these hard conversation is, and it usually turns out better. For that, let's get right into it. First is that it brings clarity to both sides. Usually in some kind of conflict, whether it's a relationship, business venture, coworkers, family relationships, there's always at least two people in a conversation, person that needs to have a conversation, the ones that's leading conversation and one's receiving. And so both have a perception of what's going to happen within the communication. Sometimes they more than likely both of them, or one of them at least, will have to have this conversation. If we haven't done it, have these hard conversations, doing these in the beginning, it will be very difficult and scary. But when we think about it with the end in mind, it's really not that bad, because when you have these hard conversations, it brings clarity to both sides. When you go into conversations, people usually think, oh, he's gonna think of this, that, he's gonna act like this way, oh, I'm gonna get fired, or he's gonna break it with me, yeah, whatever it is. I mean, due to those thoughts in our head, it brings a lot of different emotions, frustration, anxiety, restlessness, whatever it may be. Those really cause us to really cloud our mind and really cloud our judgment, which can actually deter what the point of the conversation is to really come out with a solution. And so it's important to really know that the point of that conversation is to bring clarity to both sides. Once we start to focus on that, we can have a very productive conversation. And even if one does the leading, the other is receiving of that conversation, and you need to have that hard conversation, just say it out. What you need to be objective, and be subjective in the context of your own personal perceptions of the context. The reason why it doesn't go well in some conversations is that you, or the person that's giving the leading conversation, is attacking. When people feel attacked, they become defensive, and that's when hard conversations go south. But always keep it in mind that at the end of the day, they're both there to be on the same page and bring clarity to the conversation so that you can both come up with a solution, whether it's a relationship, business venture, with your family, doesn't matter. The second good outcome of having a hard conversation is that it actually doesn't sting as bad as you think it is. I'm just going to talk about, on having to really give bad news. Good news is good news, no one really cares about that. It's just always having hard conversations. Sometimes it has to give bad news, whether you need to break up with someone, maybe you need to fire somebody, maybe you need to, let someone go, let one of your friends go. Doesn't matter. In these times, we usually have some kind of background of the context of what's happening. XYZ happened, and then we need to have the topic conversation. So we kind of both sides do know of like what is the reality of it, and it's important to really stick to that reality. When we start to make assumptions and perceptions outside, that's when conversations go south, and that's why hard conversations get a bad rep, because there's different perceptions that someone is bringing into the conversation that's not really there. So it's important in this step to also be objective in a conversation. And when someone gives you bad news, or maybe you have to give bad news, I've noticed that from my personal experience, it's not that bad. Even though it's bad news, whether, hey, you made a mistake, or, you need to be fired, you already know. And so once they rip off that band-aid, it doesn't hurt as bad. Usually it hurts really bad when you actually put someone in definite harm, death, or, you put someone in a very stressful financial situation, such as like, being sued to the extremes. But hard conversations don't always sting as hard as you think they are. Let me give you guys an example for these last two. So I used to work in a positive donation center, and so we have different roles. And so our manager and the director wanted us to step outside the role and to take on a little more tasks to really help with the flow of the company. So okay, sure, And so one of the system managers, she was very demanding and very micromanaging, and so I just clocked into work one time, and then it wasn't even a minute. She goes up to me, Garrett, are you gonna go training, with this attitude and like very belittling, demeaning attitude? And I said like, yeah, I will. And I stood my ground because like I'm not gonna take that from her. And so long story short, she pulls my mat. She noticed that there was some apprehension, which my body language showed. And then so she stepped in with my our boss at the time, and so that whole meeting didn't go that well. And so my boss told me at the end of that meeting, "Hey Garrett, come back to me tomorrow if you still want to continue. Yes or no, right? Cool." And so I had to really have this conversation with her. I've had a really good relationship with my boss, and from that previous meeting, it didn't turn out so great. So I wasn't sure, like, oh my goodness, what's gonna happen? Should we have to have a bad relationship? I just got here a few months ago. I don't want to be a bad employee, et cetera, et cetera. And so I have all these perceptions that come in. And so I came in really telling her some of my story. First off, apologizing for, what happened. Didn't mean to come out that way. I told her my perception of what happened and being objective as possible, and then how I felt, coming from a judge's standpoint. And she wanted the clarity too. So she was telling me, from their standpoint, what the goal of me stepping out of my role to do more. And then my role, I gave her what I was thinking in that world, what they wanted me to do. And so we were able to come up with, a solution that we were both on the same side. And, there were just little miscommunication, misunderstandings. And, this actually conversation wasn't even that bad. I thought coming into it was being like super bad, but it was just a little like pinch, I guess. It wasn't like a punch or shots of the head, so, which is great. And the last outcome from a hard conversation is that it actually strengthens the relationship. Sounds counterintuitive, but from the previous two, it actually builds up to the last one. You have clarity, and you took the pain away. Now this paves a different way and path towards a better relationship moving forward and journey. And so, due to this, you're able to be on the same side, and so you both have a solution, and you're both now on the same path, which is at the end of the day what all communication and conversations are geared towards, whether it's in a relationship, business venture, any kind of relationship, is that the communication is supposed to go forward. And by having that hard clarification, you're all on the same path now and moving forward. And it was so interesting. This actually hit home actually at work. I used to work at a clinic. And so there's providers, nurse practitioners, doctors, and under them there would be the medical staff, nurses, MAs. And so the MAs and LVNs had a little, I guess you say, beef. I see more tension with some of the providers, because long story short, it's a lot of stress. They conflicted, and it was pretty obvious that there was definitely tension. And so, some of the MAs toward higher ups, and higher ups, other providers stepped in. And so the providers stepped in and had to have these conversations with all the medical staff, including myself. And so the main conflict was between the MAs and the providers. And so they're the ones that kind of, had the tension. And so it was so interesting. One day, the MA was rolling eyes and giving his attitude to the provider. After the hard conversation, it actually flipped 360. The next day, the MA goes up to the provider that she had a lot of tension with and says, "Hey, Christmas is coming up. let's do a Christmas party and have a white elephant. Are you down? And the partner was, yeah, that sounds like an awesome idea. When I heard that, I was like, oh my goodness, what just happened? 24 hours ago, there's so much tension. But when you think about it, they clarified everything. They took the emotion and pain out of the way, and now they're on the same path. And due to those two, they're able to build a relationship again and actually understand each other better because of it. They know each other's beliefs and what each other was thinking. And so it clarified everything. And it was so interesting to see that. I was like, wow, that was amazing. So, case in point, hard conversations don't have to be hard. It might be the first time you're doing it or you haven't done as many, but I can assure you they're not as bad as you think. So remember, three good outcomes of having a hard conversation is that it brings clarity to both sides, it doesn't sting as much, and it actually strengthens the relationship. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.